Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud While Stoned. Today, we're going to do part 2 of Little Blue Book number 69, titled Life of Mary, Queen of Scots, written by Alexander Dumas. And give you a little peek at the back of some of these books. This is just a little description. You can pause that and read that if you like. So we left off top of page 22. And that's where we'll pick it up for part 2. Alright, let's see. Let's get that last sentence in. Bothwell's first 2 wives were of obscure birth and easily divorced. But the third was a daughter of the Earl of Huntley, and so harder to dispose of. Both, fortunately for Bothwell, his behavior had made her already long for a divorce, and there was no difficulty in persuading her to bring a charge of adultery against him. So Bothwell confessed in court that he had had criminal intercourse with one of her relatives, and the Archbishop of St. Andrews granted the decree. As the second obstacle, that of violence upon the Queen, Mary removed it herself. Being brought before the court, she declared that not only did she pardon Bothwell for his conduct towards her, but that she intended raising him to further honors. And a few days afterwards, she created him Duke of Orkney. And on the 15th of the same month, Mary Stuart married the Earl of Bothwell. As Bothwell had not yet received his divorces, he was now the husband of 4 wives, one of them a queen. Mary's delusion was short-lived. Scarcely was she in Bothwell's power than she discovered what a master she had. Gross, unfeeling, and brutal. He seemed to have been chosen by Providence to avenge the wrongs of which he himself had been the instigator. His fits of passion reached such a degree that one day Mary seized a dagger from Erskine, who, with Melville, was present and would have stabbed herself had not those with her prevented. Such public scenes gave a pretext to the nobles who were seeking an opportunity to start a revolt. At last, the Earls of Mar, Argyle, Glencairn, Lindy, Boyd, Morton, and Maitland rose. They said to avenge the death of the king, and to take his son from the hands of his father's murderer. The insurrection took place so swiftly that the Confederate lords, whose plan was to surprise and seize both Mary and Bothwell, thought they would succeed at the first outbreak. The king and queen were at the table with Lord Borthwick, who was entertaining them, when suddenly it was announced that a large body of armed men had surrounded the castle. Bothwell and Mary both realized the situation. Bothwell dressed himself as a squire, Mary as a page, and mounting their horses escaped by one door just as the Confederates were breaking in by another. The fugitives escaped to Dunbar. There they called together their allies, who signed a treaty to defend the king and queen. In the meantime, the Confederates, having failed at Borthwick Castle, and not feeling strong enough to attack Bothwell at Dunbar, marched to Edinburgh, where they enlisted a man that Bothwell had looked upon as his friend. This was James Balfour, governor of the citadel, who had attended to the planting of the mine that blew up Darnbury. Not only did Balfour deliver Edinburgh Castle into the hands of the Confederates, but also gave them a silver coffer containing papers valuable to Mary's enemies. They were letters, whether genuine or spurious, that, as Balfour said, would yield them only the Queen's life. These yielded them her honor. Bothwell, having levied troops, set out Pardon me. Sorry, I had to pause that. A coughing attack took me. Okay, let's back up here a second. Make sure our sentence structure is correct. Okay, Bothwell, having levied troops, set out with his army without even waiting for his allies, the Hamiltons, who were assembling their vassals, and on June 15th, 1567, the Queen's forces and the Confederates were face to face. Mary, who tried to avoid bloodshed, sent the French ambassador to the Confederate lords to ask them to lay aside their arms. They refused. Then Lord Kirkcaldy advised the Queen to desert Bothwell and go to the camp of the Confederates on condition that they would acknowledge her as Queen. Mary consented, but at the moment of leaving Bothwell, she broke down and, weeping bitterly, asked that announcement be made that she had broken relations with Bothwell. Leaving Mary in tears, Bothwell mounted his horse and started full speed for Dunbar. The next day, the arrival of Lord Kirkcaldy from the Confederate camp was announced by trumpeters preceding him. Mary went to meet him. "My lord," she said, "I surrender to you on the condition that you have proposed to me on the part of the nobles, and here in my hand as a sign of confidence." Kirkcaldy knelt down, kissed the Queen's hand, and, rising, took her horse by the bridle and led her to the Confederate camp. Those of rank in the army received her with such marks of respect as to satisfy her of their loyalty. But it was not so with the soldiers and common people. Hardly had the Queen reached the second line formed by them, than murmurs arose and voices were heard. "To the stake with the adulteress! To the stake with the parricide?" Yeah, parricide. Mary bore these cries stoically, but a yet more terrible ordeal was in store for her. Suddenly, she saw before her a banner on which was depicted on one side the dead king stretched out in the fatal garden, and on the other the young prince kneeling, his eyes raised to heaven, with the inscription, "O Lord, judge and revenge my cause." At sight of this, Mary reined in her horse and started to turn back, but she had gone but a few paces when the accusing banner again blocked her way. Wherever she went, she met this accusation. For 2 hours she had before her eyes the king's corpse demanding revenge, and the young prince praying God to punish the murderers. At last she could endure it no longer. She fainted and would have fallen from her horse had not someone caught her. That evening Mary Stuart entered Edinburgh, preceded by the accusing banner, more as a prisoner than a queen. As she went through the town, the hootings and curses of the people followed her. At last, bowed down with shame, she reached the house of the Lord Provost. However, all this hatred was meant more for Bothwell than for herself. The populace was attacking Bothwell and Darnley's widow. The curses were for Bothwell. Bothwell was the adulterer, the murderer. Mary was the weak woman, who this very night gave fresh proof of her folly. The following night had scattered the crowd, and quiet was regained, when Mary ceased to be uneasy on her own account, turned her thoughts toward Bothwell. She wrote him a long letter, promising never to desert him. This letter written, she bribed a soldier with a purse of gold to deliver it to Bothwell at Dunbar. The next morning, Mary was awakened by an armed man entering her room. Astonished and frightened, she sat up in bed, and parting the curtains, saw before her Lord Lindsay of Byres, one of her oldest friends. "Do you know this writing, madam?" he said, showing the Queen the letter she had written to Bothwell. "Yes, doubtless, my lord," answered Mary, "but I am already a prisoner then that my correspondence is intercepted. It is no longer allowed to a wife to write to her husband." When the husband is a traitor, replied Lindsay, it is no longer allowed a wife to right him, especially if the wife has a part in the treason. Do you forget, cried Mary, that you are speaking to your queen? There was a time, madam, said Lindsay, when I would have spoken in gentle terms, bending the knee, although it is not the nature of the Scottish to model ourselves as French courtiers. But thanks to your changing loves, you have kept us so much in the field in armor that our voices are cold from the night air and our knees stiff. Mary Stuart grew pale at this want of respect, but containing her anger, said, I must at least know by what right you entered my bedroom. The letter you have would lead me to suspect you as a spy. Are you a spy or my jailer? Neither, madam. I am chief of the escort, which will retire you at Lochleven Castle, your future residence. The Confederate lords will select a regent for the kingdom. At what time is my departure fixed? Asked Mary. At 11 o'clock, ma'am. And there's like a little 3 asterisks, so it's like the end of a chapter or something, I don't know. But it's a perfect time to have something to drink because I've got severe cotton mouth. And then we're just going to do some more cotton mouth. Because that's the crazy, vicious circle of humanity. Don't ask me. It's just the way the thing works. I don't make the rules around here. For God's sakes, if I made the rules around here, I'd have new lungs. All right, here we go. We're going to pick back up. Dethroned, a prisoner, without a friend in a castle, what remained of Mary Stuart, of her 2 thrones, England and Scotland, and her double power? One last battle was made to restore her power, but it was lost. Mary escaped and fled with her friends without taking any rest, without ceasing to weep. At last, having traversed the countries of Renfrew and Ayr, she reached the Abbey of Dundernan in Galloway on the sea, and feeling safe from danger, gave orders to stop. The prior received her at the gate of the convent. I bring you misfortune and ruin, father, and then that next entire sentence is completely wiped out. It's like blanked. Something, her horse. And it looks like it says, you are welcome, replied the prior, since they came accompanied by a Christian, leaning on Mary Seyton, S-E-Y-T-O-N, Seaton, and on Lord Humphreys, both, and then the rest of the sentence is gone. Her trouble, Mary Stuart of Scotland entered. The convent. All hope, let me get the page to bend. All hope of ever rescinding the throne was gone. There remained but 3 courses to take: to flee to France, or Spain, or take refuge in England. On advice of Lord Harris, Mary decided upon the last, and that same night she wrote to Queen Elizabeth. My dear sister, I have often enough begged you to receive my tempest-tossed vessel into your haven during this storm. If at this pass she finds a safe harbor there, I shall cast anchor there forever. Otherwise the bark is in God's keeping, for she is ready and caulked for defense on her voyage against all storms. I have dealt openly with you, and still do so. Do not take it in a bad part if I write thus. It is not in defiance of you, as it appears, for in everything I rely on your friendship. Elizabeth of England trembled with joy at receiving this letter. For 8 years she had followed the fortunes of Mary Stuart as a wolf follows a gazelle. At last the gazelle sought refuge in the wolf's den. Elizabeth had never hoped as much. She immediately dispatched an order to the Sheriff of Cumberland to make known to Mary that she was ready to receive her. One morning, a bugle was heard blowing on the seashore. It was Queen Elizabeth's envoy, come to fetch Queen Mary Stuart. In our time, we have seen another royal fugitive confide himself in the mercy of England, like Mary Stuart. He was rewarded for his confidence and found the deadly climate of St. Helena, the scaffold of Fotheringay, Fotheringay, Fotheringay. Never heard of it. Mary Stuart set out on the journey with her small following. Arrived at the shore of Solway Firth, she found there the warden of the English marches. He was a man named Lothar, who received the queen with great respect, but informed her that not more than 3 of the women could accompany her. Mary Seaton, Seyton, was one of these. "I regret," said Lothar, "that I cannot offer a welcome in England to all who would wish to follow you there. But our queen has given positive orders, and we must obey." "Positive orders!" cried the prior. "Do you hear, madam? You are lost if you quit this shore. Then, turning to Lord Harris and the other lords, she exclaimed, "Hold her back, my lords. In heaven's name, do not let her go." "What means this anger, sir priest?" said the warden of the marches. "I came here at the queen's request. She is free to remain if she desires. Madam, do you consent to go with me to England of your own will?" "Sir," answered Mary Stuart, "I ask your pardon for what has been said. Freely I leave Scotland to go to my royal sister." Oh, that's foolish. When she landed in England, the Queen of Scotland should have realized the truth of the priest's warning. Messengers from Elizabeth expressed the regret of their sovereign felt in being unable to personally welcome her. But it was necessary, they said, that she should first clear herself of the death of Darnley. Okay. Yeah, every time I turn a page, to get it to open fully, it just breaks the entire page. Murray, who knew Elizabeth's intentions, came to England with the evidence of Mary Stuart having not only been the mistress of Bothwell during Darnley's lifetime, but also asserting that she was aware of the plot to assassinate Darnley. Lord Harris and the Bishop of Ross swore that the evidence was forged. Mary Stuart, instead of finding protection in Queen Elizabeth, was made a prisoner in Sheffield Castle. Days, months, years passed. History states that Mary spent 16 years in prison, until at last she was taken to Tutbury Castle and placed in charge of Sir Amyas Paulet, her last jailer. It was suggested to Paulet that he would render a service to the Queen of England by cutting short the existence of her who, already condemned in Elizabeth's mind, delayed to die. But Sir Amos Paulet refused to comply with the suggestion. Elizabeth had to be content with tormenting her rival, waiting for the opportune time to put her out of the way. That time, after so long delay, came. A young Catholic Babington, a last scion of that ancient chivalry which was dying out at that time, zealous on account of the excommunication of Pope Pius V, which pronounced Queen Elizabeth fallen from her kingdom and damned for all eternity, resolved to restore Mary to freedom, who was beginning to be looked upon as a martyr to her religious faith. Accordingly, in spirit of the law that Elizabeth had decreed, and which condemned to death any design upon her rights to the throne or any conspiracy against her person, Babington, with 5 other zealous Catholics, formed a plot to assassinate Elizabeth and put Mary Stuart on the British throne. But Elizabeth's watchers discovered the plot, and the men were arrested. There was no evidence that Mary was in the plot. This desperate conspiracy delighted Elizabeth. It placed... where'd it go? Oh my God, okay. Okay. Okay, there it is. This desperate conspiracy delighted Elizabeth. It placed Mary's life in her hands. She immediately ordered the prisoner's papers seized and had her removed to Farthingly Castle. Reaching there, she found the apartment she was to occupy already hung in black. Mary Stuart had entered her tomb. Babington and his accomplices had already been beheaded. The commissioners of Queen Elizabeth sentenced Mary to death. But afraid of a public execution, Elizabeth again thought of poisoning or assassination. She sent her secretary, Davison, to Sir Amos Paulet, in whose custody, after her sentence, Mary still was. But Paulet declared that he would allow no one to have access to Mary but the executioner, who must carry the warrant signed by Elizabeth. Elizabeth then asked Davison for the warrant. He gave it to her, and, forgetting that she was the daughter of a queen whom her father, Henry VIII, had beheaded, she signed it without a trace of emotion. Then, having affixed to it the Great Seal of England, she laughed and said, "Go and tell Walsingham that all is ended for Queen Mary, but tell him with precaution, for, as he is ill, I am afraid he will die of grief when he hears it." The jest was the more atrocious in that Walsingham was known to be Mary Stuart's bitterest enemy. Beale, Walsingham's brother-in-law, was summoned to the palace. Queen Elizabeth gave into his hands the death warrant, and with it an order addressed to the Earls of Shrewsbury, Kent, Rutland, and other noblemen to be present at the execution. Beale took with him the executioner, whom Elizabeth had dressed in black velvet for the execution. Mary Stuart knew the decree of the commissioners the day it had been pronounced. Her chaplain had informed her. She gave him 3 letters to send away, one to Pope Sixtus V, one to Don Bernard Mendoza, and the last to the Duke of Guise. Guise, Guise. Following is the last letter. Pardon me. 4th of December, 1586. My good cousin, whom I hold dearest in the world, I bid you farewell, being prepared to be put to death by an unjust judgment, and to death such as no one of our race, thanks to God, and never a queen, and still less one of my rank, has ever suffered. But, good cousin, praise the Lord, for I was useless to the cause of God and his church in this world, prisoner as I was, while, on the contrary, I hope that my death will bear witness to my constancy in the faith and to my willingness to suffer for the maintenance of the restoration of the Catholic Church in this unfortunate island. And though never has executioner dipped his hand in our blood, have no shame of it, my friend, for the judgment of heretics, who have no authority over me, a free queen, is profitable in the sight of God to the children of his church. If I adhered, moreover, to what they proposed to me, I should not suffer this stroke. All of our house have been persecuted by this sect. Witness your good father, for whose intercession I hope to be received with mercy by the just judge. I command to you, then, my poor servants, the discharge of my debts, and the founding of an annual mass for my soul, not at your expense, but that you may make the arrangements, as you will be required when you learn my wishes through my poor and faithful servants, who are about to witness my last tragedy. God prosper you, your wife, children, brothers, and cousins, and above all our chief, my good brother and cousin, and all his. The blessing of God and that which I shall give to my children be on yours, whom I do not commend less to God than my own son, unfortunate and ill-treated as he is. You will receive some rings from me which will remind you to pray to God for the soul for the soul of your unhappy cousin, deprived of all help and counsel save that of the Lord, who gives me strength and courage alone to resist so many wolves howling after me. To God be the glory. Oh, poor Mary. Poor Mary. Believe particularly what will be told you by a person who will give you a ruby ring from me. For I take it on my conscience that the truth will be told you of what I have charged him to tell, and especially in that which concerns my poor servants and the share of any. I command this person to you for his simple sincerity and honesty, that he may be given some good employment. I have chosen him as the least partial. I have chosen him as the least partial, and as the one who will most simply bring you my commands. Ignore, I beg you, that he told you anything in particular, for envy might injure him. I have suffered a great deal for 2 years and more, and have not been able to let you know for an important reason. God be praised for all, and give you grace to preserve in the service of his church as long as you live, and never may this honor pass from our race, while so many men and women are ready to shed their blood to maintain the fight for the faith, all other worldly considerations set aside. And as for me, I esteem myself born on both father's and mother's sides, that I should offer up my blood for this cause, and I have no intention of degenerating. Jesus crucified for us, and all the holy martyrs make us by their intercession worthy of the voluntary offering we make of our bodies to their glory. They have, thinking to degrade me, pulled down my canopy of state, and since then my keeper has come to offer to write to their queen, saying this deed was not done by his order, but by the advice of some of his council. I have shown them, instead of my arms, on the said canopy, the cross of our Lord. You will hear all this. They have been more gentle since your affectionate cousin. They've been more gentle since your affectionate cousin and perfect friend, Mary, Queen of Scotland, Dowager of France. She's pretty full of herself, isn't she? On Tuesday, February 17th, at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Earls of Kent and Shrewsbury, together with Beale, sent word to Mary Stuart that they desired to speak with her. She answered that she was ill and in bed, but notwithstanding, if what they had to tell her was a matter of importance, she would get up. They replied that communication admitted of no delay. Mary then arose and dressed. The two earls, accompanied by Beale, Amos, Paulette, and Drew Drury, 2 names, D-R-U-E, Drew, Drury, D-R-U-R-Y, entered her room. Behind them, full of terrible anxiety, came her dearest ladies and most cherished servants. Those were the Mrs. Renee Derilly, Giles Mowbray, Jeanie Kennedy, Elsif Curley, Mary Paget, and Susan Kirkcaldy, and Dominique Burgoyne, her doctor, Pierre Gourjon, her apothecary, Jacques Gervais, her surgeon, Abinel Stewart, her footman, Didier Siffart, her butler, Jean Lauder, her baker, and Hewitt, her carver. With bared head, the Earl of Shrewsbury spoke. Madam, the Queen of England, my august mistress, has sent me to you with the Earl of Kent and Sir Robert Beale, here present, to make known to you that after having honorably proceeded in the inquiry into the deed of which you are accused and found guilty, an inquiry which has already been submitted to your grace by Lord Buckhurst, and having delayed as long as it was in her power the execution of the sentence, she can no longer withstand the impunity of her subjects who press her to carry it out. So great and loving is their fear for her. For this purpose we have come the bearers of a commission, and we beg very humbly, madam, that it may please you to hear it read. Read, my lord, I am listening, replied Mary Stuart with great calmness. Then Sir Robert Beale unrolled the commission and read. Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, and Ireland, etc., to our beloved and faithful cousins, George, Earl of Shrewsbury, Grand Marshal of England, Henry, Earl of Kent, Henry, Earl of Derby, George, Earl of Cumberland, Henry, Earl of Pembroke, greeting. Considering the sentence by us given and others of our council, nobility and judges against the former Queen of Scotland, bearing the name of Mary, daughter and heiress of James V, King of Scotland, commonly called Queen of Scotland and Dowager of France, which sentence all the estates of our realm in our last Parliament assembled not only concluded, but, after mature deliberation, ratified as being just and reasonable, considering also the urgent prayer and request of our subjects, begging us and pressing us to proceed to the publication thereof, and to carry it into execution against her person, according as they judge it duly merited. Adding in their place that her detention was and would be a certain and evident danger, not only to our life, but also to themselves and their posterity, and to the public weal of this realm. Sound like Daffy Duck. As much as account of the gospel and the true religion of Christ as of the peace and tranquility of this state, although the said sentence has been frequently delayed, so that even until this we abstained from issuing the commission to execute it, yet for the complete satisfaction of the said demands made by the estates of our Parliament, through which daily we hear that all our friends and subjects, as well as the nobility, the wisest, greatest, and most pious, nay, even those of inferior condition, with all humanity and affection from the care they have of our life, and consequently from the fear they have of the destruction of the present divine and happy state of the realm, if we spare the final execution, consenting and desiring the said execution. Though the general and continual demands, prayers, counsels, and advice were in such things contrary to our natural inclination, yet being convinced of the urgent weight of their continual intercessions tending to the safety of our persons, and also to the public and private state of our realm, we have at last consented and suffered that justice have its course. And for its execution, considering the singular confidence we have in our fidelity and loyalty, together for the love and affection that you have towards us, particularly to the safeguarding of our person and our country, of which you are very noble and the chief members, we summon, and for the discharge of it we enjoin you, that at sight of these presents you go to the castle of Fotheringay, where the former Queen of Scotland is, in the care of our friend and faithful servant and counsellor Sir Amos Paulet, and there take into your keeping, and do that by your command execution be done on her person, in the presence of yourselves and said Sir Amos Paulet, and all the other officers of justice whom you command to be there. In the meantime, we have for this end and this execution given warrant in such a way and manner, and in such a time and place, and by such persons, that you 5, 4, 3, or 2 find expedient in your discretion, notwithstanding all laws, statutes, and ordinances whatsoever contrary to these presents, seal with our great seal of England, which will serve for each of you and all those who are present, or will make by your order anything pertaining to the execution aforesaid full and sufficient discharge forever. Now I understand where lawyers get their fucking writing from. God, was that ever just a bunch of horse shit. Okay, done and given in our house at Greenwich the 1st day of February, 10th of February, new style, in the 29th year of our reign. Mary listened to this reading with somethingness and dignity, and then half the sentence is gone. Something cross said, "Welcome to all news which comes in the name of God. Thanks, Lord, for that you deign to put an end to all the ills you have seen me suffer for 19 years and more. Madam," said the Earl of Kent, "you have no ill will towards us on account of your death. It was necessary to the peace of the state and the progress of the new religion." For crying out loud. Our hands are tied. For crying out loud is mine. That's not in the book. "So," cried Mary, "I shall have the happiness of dying for the faith of my fathers." Oh, joy. "Thus God deigns to grant me the glory of martyrdom. Thanks, God." Thanks a lot. What craziness. "Thanks, God. Thanks that you have destined me for such an end, of which I was not worthy. That, oh my God, is indeed a proof of your love and an assurance that you will receive me in the number of your servants." God, these people are so twisted. "For although this sentence has been notified to me, I was afraid, from the manner in which they have dealt with me for 19 years, of not being so near as I am to such a happy end. Thinking that your queen would not dare to lay a hand on me, who, by the grace of God, am a queen as she is, the daughter of a queen as she is, crowned as she is, her near relative, granddaughter of King Henry VII, and who has had the honor of being Queen of France, of which I am still dowager. And this fear was so much greater," she added, laying her hand on a New Testament which was on a table near her, "that I swear on the Holy Book, I have never attempted, consented to, or even desired the death of my sister, the Queen of England." Well, she didn't kill her husband, so. "Madam," said the Earl of Kent, pointing to the New Testament, "this book by which you have sworn is not genuine, since it is the Papist version. Consequently, your oath cannot be considered as any more genuine than the book on which it has been taken." Oh, that was rude. And with that, we're going to stop right there. Rude Earl. This is the end of part number 2 of Little Blue Book number 69, titled The Life of Mary, Queen of Scots, written by Alexander Dumas. Thanks for listening, and join me in the next part.